This is No Expectations, the podcast where we have unedited, lively conversations about spirituality, Zen Buddhism, holistic living, and everything in between. My name is Andrew. I'm a lifelong Zen Bodhisattva. It sounds much more fancy than it really is. A part-time tracksuit tailor and an author. This is my buddy, Jen.
What's up? I'm Jen. I love a good cup of coffee, a long walk in the woods at a comfortable, moderate pace. And I love having these conversations about kind of living life with no expectations.
We're doing it remotely today. Hey, Jen, how are you?
Andrew, I'm good. How are you?
I'm living the dream.
Please
Yeah.
tell me more.
I mean, I wouldn't want to give it away and make anybody else feel bad about their own existence, but I'm just, I'm doing what makes me
Humble.
happy.
You're so humble. You're so humble.
Yeah. As we both like touch our pearls on our neck and clench our pearls. Oh, bless your tiny heart.
Yep.
So I have a story to tell you, and I haven't told you this. I've been saving it just for the episode, and I didn't even give you like a
No heads
preface
up.
before we
Okay.
started.
All
So
right, let me get my coffee
I
first.
want like real-time reaction to this.
Okay.
Put your coffee down.
Yep.
Anyhow, no, it's not that big of a deal.
Nope,
So
nope.
I was out hiking in the woods on Sunday, like I normally do, the same place I always am. And I was coming back the trail, and it was quiet out there. There really wasn't anybody out there. And in the distance, I could hear somebody like screaming and yelling. And at first, I didn't know what it was. And the closer I, started making my way back to the trailhead, I could kind of sense the kind of cadence and the same sound this person was making. And I realized that this man was trying to call his dog.
Okay.
And I really wasn't sure where he was in the woods. I wasn't sure if it's like, it's hard to kind of know where people are. And so I'm coming down to this part of the trail, and I run into this jogger, and she says, "Oh, there's this man that's looking for this dog. If you happen to see it, he's pretty desperate." And I was like, okay, best of luck with that. Kept coming down the trail, and I came over the little creek not far from the infamous
hiking
harm
hole?
sign. And I hear this heavy panting coming from the creek bed. And so I look down there, and I see this dog, and I call the dog to me, and the dog kind of like it's exhausted and makes its way out of the creek and onto the trail, and it's kind of apprehensive about me a little bit. And I've had the supreme honor of having a lot of dogs in my life and training dogs, so I'm pretty well aware of their energy and stuff like that. And so the dog was, was tired and was scared or whatever. And so I was, talking to it, trying to get it to calm down. And I reached down and I grabbed it by its collar. And, in the meantime, I could hear the same man yelling for the dog. And he was a little closer this time. And so I have the dog in my right hand, or holding this collar in my right hand. And I turn and I yell, and I say, "Hey, the dog is here." And the dog got spooked by that and turned and bit my arm.
Aww.
Yeah. And I'm not going to tell you what type of breed it was, because I don't want to continue this craziness about, bad breed dogs that do bad things. Like, it's inside of
It's an animal.
every,
Animal dog.
exactly. And so I was wearing a long sleeve shirt, and I didn't really realize what had happened. And I've been bit, full disclosure, I've been bit by plenty of dogs before. Like, and so I took a moment, and I took a few breaths, and like, I think a lot of people would have been pretty upset and like jerked the dog or let the dog go or whatever. And I sat there with the dog, and I was like, okay, you're going to be cool. I'm going to be cool. We're going to sit here. We're going to breathe together. We're going to chill out. I'm not going to choke you out. We're going to be fine here together. And so we sat there for what seemed like about 5-10 minutes. Finally, the owner shows up, and he's, apologetic. And he's, told me like, oh, the dog slipped its collar, but somehow it still had its collar on its neck, and all this stuff. And I was like, okay, and gave the dog back to the guy, and he was like, oh, thank you so much for doing this. And I was like, yeah, but you need to put the dog on a leash when you're out here and stuff like that. And he's like, oh yeah, 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 yeah. And so at that point was the first time I had a chance to look at my arm. And so I pulled up the sleeve of my shirt, and my arm was bleeding. I mean, there was blood all the way down into my hand from what had happened. And I just in real time just showed it to him as I saw it, and his face turned pale white. And he was like, oh my God, I'm so sorry, I'm so sorry. And I was like, it was nothing to say at that point. It was like it was done. And I just said to him, I was like, we have to be mindful of our actions and how it impacts not only the people around us, but like how this dog got to behave the way it did. Like most calm, submissive dogs wouldn't behave like that.
Yeah.
So obviously the animal is jacked up, and I turned around and walked away. And as I walked away, he just kept saying, oh my God, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. And long story short, I took an opportunity to kind of think about our true nature, and the dog's true nature, and what fear does to our true nature. And yeah, a dog is not a human being, and a dog doesn't have the same experiences that we do, but it is kind of an interesting experiment to look at. Like, I think a dog is much more closer to its primal instincts than maybe man is, or
Yeah.
maybe man likes to think we are. But when fear comes into the mix, what happens? And I don't hold any grudge against the dog because it's its true nature. It doesn't have any other tools to communicate
Yeah.
its fear, right? It didn't have any. It didn't be like, "Hey, dude, can you stop? Hey, I'm freaked out right now," right?
Yeah.
Its only tool was its mouth,
Yeah. Or
right?
to run away,
Or
like
to run away,
fight or flight reaction to fear and stress like that. And he
right?
did what was natural to him, which was defend his ground.
Right. And it's just something that it had learned. It wasn't the first time it probably done that,
Yeah.
right? And it learned, like, well, when I turn around and nip at or bite somebody, like, it makes whatever's bothering me go away. And so it was just an interesting conversation with myself about what true nature is, and like how we let other things get in our way of being who we are, right?
Mhm.
And letting fear kind of dictate a lot of what happens in our own lives. And I could have easily, if it was somebody else, they could have easily sat there and beat that dog for doing what it did. Or, like, so I did go to the doctor. The doctor's like, oh, you got to fill out this report, and you got to do all this stuff because, we need to find out where the dog is, and we need maybe
Mhm.
see if it's been bit other people. And if it has, then we need to take those types of actions.
Yeah.
And I said to him, I said, well, the dog was just being a dog. And he looked at me and he was like, what? And he's like, you should be more upset than this. And I was like, but why should I be? I was like, the dog just knows what it knows. So I'm struggle with that a bit over the last couple of days. I want to know your thoughts about true nature, and maybe from not just a dog's perspective, but our human perspective.
Yeah. I mean, well, first of all, I'm glad you're okay. If it had been me, because I hiked those same woods, I think if it had been me, it would have scared me, and it could have caused even more of an attack from an
Mhm.
animal like that. So glad it was you, not me.
Well, if I
um,
start foaming at the mouth, it's because I have rabies.
yeah. Good luck to you.
It's not you, it's because I have rabies.
It's just the rabies. um,
I
but
mean, I hold on, let me back up. I may have given the dog rabies.
yeah,
That's
yeah, yeah, yeah. You
okay.
should probably find the owner and let him know you should have his
And I
dog
had rabies. Right.
from the right.
Anyhow, sorry.
One, I would. You didn't collect the owner's information at all.
You know me, I'm not out there in the woods with a pen and paper and a phone.
Are you sure? Because you wrote a note about your hiking poles a couple weeks
Mm,
ago.
nice try. Nice
Okay.
try. I
Okay.
came back. I had a billboard printed out for that.
The flyer. Um, I am. As a dog owner myself, I do think that like the owner should be held accountable in some way for letting that dog run off leash, because that was you. It could have been a kid. It could have been, an elderly person who could have been hurt more. So
It could have been another dog. It could have been there's I mean, we
yeah,
can live in that scenario of it could have beens all day.
yeah. But however, like, be responsible dog pet owners and keep your animals on leashes, especially in shared spaces like that. So,
Mhm.
anyways, um, to the true nature point, we also, let me add, the first time you and I talked about true nature, I was in this space. So,
There are no coincidences in this life.
none, none. Everything is for my enlightenment.
Amen.
Amen. So, I don't know. True nature was, the first time we talked about it was a little difficult for me to grasp because um, I was so, like, I held on, I was so attached to my reactions to experiences I've had in 40 something years. So, my anxieties, my panic, and my fears were just, there's so many layers of it that was like, how am I supposed to dig through all that and find my true nature? Because my true nature is in fight or flight mode, or, constantly. So I don't know. It was, it's still a topic that I struggle with. Maybe not struggle with, but seeking to understand my true nature more.
Yeah, and I think it's and again, this is just an anecdote, but it is the idea of like when the one tool that we can cut through and find all of like cut through all the nonsense is love and compassion.
Yeah.
And I'm no like I could like I said, it could have gone a different way. Like it could have gone into like could have sat there and beat the dog or left the dog loose and
Or
like
berated the owner or had.
berated the owner. And don't get me wrong, I did say like, hey man, you can't do this. And it's like you need to get training and the dog needs to get training. And it's like, let's be smart. But I wasn't like I didn't think it was the right thing to take it out on the dog. Like as a mother, you get this too. Not the saying a dog and child are the same, but it is a similar what I would think is similar experience as an adult that you can't reprimand a child or a dog or anyone for past actions that happened almost in a dog's mind an eternity ago.
Yeah. I mean, as speaking from a parent perspective, I have three kids. One is in adulthood, and the youngest is in middle, early, um, elementary school. And the 8-year-old, or the older ones, kind of help me see how close the younger one is to his true nature. And as he grows and as he adds experiences, he adds to the layers that kind of cover up his true nature. But the way he reacts to situations, and the way he responds to me, out of anger when something doesn't go his way, is just so pure and basic at our granular level that you want something, you get it, you get upset. So um, it's a challenge that I did not understand as parenting my first two kids, that I'm much more lenient with my third, of letting them explore and understand, and I'm less reactive. So
So
uh,
yeah, that's what I was going to try. That was, I mean, as we went down that, is that something that your oldest, like you didn't have that tool in your toolbox, if you will,
yeah,
that you do now to like, okay, instead of like being reactive and freaking out, now you're taking a beat and going, okay, this is not the end of the world. I'm going to let this emotion kind of play out. Do you feel like that's been
yeah.
a change for you?
Yeah. Instead of, with the first one, you're like trying to stop those behaviors, and immediately, like, anger isn't good. Don't get mad. Jealousy, all those, human feelings that we have, you try so hard to make them stop because they're not good
Suppress them.
feelings.
Yeah.
And, as now with experience comes wisdom and knowledge. Yeah. With the younger one, I think that's why the younger one usually appears to get away with more from the older kids is because I'm a more patient and more understanding parent when I'm like, oh, he's
Or just maybe you're just more exhausted. Maybe you're just more exhausted. It's like I don't have time for this, man. You're
it's a
gonna
good
figure it out.
it's a good way
But
to call that.
back to something that I think we've talked about multiple times is this idea of a child's mind is much more pure because they're not exposed, they're not as jaded, right? They haven't gone through as much experiential learning as an adult has. And our trick as an adult is to try to reconnect with that childlike mind, to see the world anew in every moment, which is really difficult. Which is really difficult. But it's you know better than I do when you talk to a child. There's usually like no filter. It's like they're just stream of consciousness type thing. Like this sucks. This is great. It's like a very very simple and
Think
um,
it, speak it. Yeah.
yeah, and so there's no other like, oh, I gotta be careful about how I say this, and like I don't want to step on your toes, and like none of that
Mhm.
because they haven't gone through this process of kind of experiencing the world and kind of understanding that there's maybe some repercussions for
Yeah.
those types of things.
Yeah.
And obviously, as we go back to the dog thing, and dog doesn't have that ability. A dog will learn, a dog understands, but it
You can't reason with an animal. Like,
right.
you're not going to make a deal or.
But like I like to believe in, because again, I've trained a lot of dogs in my time, a lot of what we would call bully breeds, some really, misunderstood breeds. And I'd worked with a trainer that was training me how to train dogs. And he kind of said something that still resonates with me as somebody who's a spiritualist. It's about this exchange of energy. Animals understand energy really well,
Mhm.
probably better than humans do, right? Um, and he says that, if you're freaked out and you're going through all these stages of anger and whatever, like the dog's gonna like see that and it's gonna feed off that energy too. And for an example, if you have a leash between you and your dog that you're working with, and you take your dog into what is a stressful situation for you, whatever that might be,
Yeah.
like other dogs or whatever, like you start holding the leash a little tighter. And the dog's like, oh, wait, what? Like
Mm-hmm.
he's freaked out. Like the whole energy in this leash, this connection between us just like got really weird. So I need to freak out. So then the dog starts to open its chest up and it's like, I'm freaking out, you're freaking out. And then the whole exchange becomes like a feedback loop where
Mm-hmm.
everyone's energy goes through the roof and then something bad happens. So
Yeah.
it's that moment where you can just stop and be like, okay, this isn't the worst thing in the world. Loosen the grip on the leash. The dog's like, well, he's cool. I guess I can be cool too.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, that was a lot to learn working with animals than I could work with human beings. And I know that sounds strange, but like it was a conditioning for me. It was a conditioning for me as a teacher to go, okay, like they're not getting this, so I need to reframe this.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So, yeah. And I mean, the journey with true nature is a long process that's constantly evolving.
Mm-hmm.
And, um, and I think for a lot of times we become kind of ashamed of we might be ashamed of who we are, right? Because it's different than the mask that we wear out for the rest of the world, or maybe the mask that we have in front of ourselves in the mirror,
Yeah.
right? Like being vulnerable, being emotional, being connected, being all of those things like, oh, I don't want to be that. That
Mm-hmm.
seems weak, right?
Yeah.
So what is your journey with your true nature?
My my favorite way to kind of try to connect with my true nature, not that I'm going in expecting it, but is to really pay attention to animals and animal behaviors
Mhm.
when they cross my path. Um, like the other day, random I'm on the way to school, I think, in the morning, and a huge fox was just walking down my street. No, I was walking to the bus stop, so I wasn't driving. And I I kind of live at a corner, so it's waiting for me at the corner, and I turn, and this fox just kept walking, and it would turn around and look at me to see if I was still walking toward it. And every time it would stop, I would stop. And there was enough distance between us. I wasn't scared or anything, but um, it it was just so weird to me how it kept turning around to see if I was still paying attention to it. And it didn't seem afraid. It didn't feel like I didn't get an impression that either one of us was afraid of it. We were just kind of curious about each other. And then it just kind of crossed the road. And when it got to some bushes, it turned around again and then just went on its way. And being in these moments where animals are in their purest, truest nature and learning from them, and um, just kind of understanding, why this animals, how they act and how they behave and how I can connect to them is my like kind
So
of.
if it turned around and ate your neighborhood cat, would you be upset? Or would you
No, no.
or could you like be like, "Oh, it's just its true nature."
So I mean, there was a time when, like similar story. There was a copperhead snake in the neighbor's yard, and everyone was like, "Gotta kill it!" And we chopped off its head because it's a dangerous snake, and there are kids in the area. And now I kind of look at it differently as like that snake is existing in its space, and if I teach my people how to stay away from the snakes, then does it have to die because I'm afraid of it? I don't think so. So
So,
I
I
think.
mean, there's a big takeaway right there. I think we've used the word multiple times in the last 20 minutes, fear.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so, what role does fear have in our journey to understand our world around us? I mean, our fear can blind us, right?
Yeah.
Like it can just make us ignorant, and there's no higher authority in life than ignorance, right? And so, like this idea that we're afraid of everything, we're afraid of all outcomes, like all scenarios. Like, what does that do to our life? What does that do to our understanding of who we are and our place in this universe?
Yeah. I mean, from a mental health perspective, it keeps you in a state of
Panic,
panic, of fight or
anxiety.
flight.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that, if you think about being in a state of fear or fight or flight, it's just weaved through all your blood cells and your DNA, and like it oozes out of you, and it doesn't just shake off until you figure out a way to quiet your mind. And fear is very natural, fear is very normal. Like the animals are fear, they fear for their life, they fear for, but they respond in one or two ways. But they don't live in fear
Right.
unless.
Well, I
Yeah.
mean, their needs are very basic, right? They're very basic, and so, but fear is that other thing that's part of our ego, right? Something that's
Mhm.
we don't understand, or um, is different than we are, or thinks differently than we do. We become afraid of, and then we want to destroy it or run away from it or whatever. And
You
that
gotta
has
face it.
we got to face fear, and you got to sometimes like stop and maybe find new ways to understand what's causing that fear. And that
Hmm.
again goes back to love and compassion.
Yeah.
Love and compassion, cutting through that, right? I mean, we live in a very divisive world these days, and there's people we don't understand and we're afraid of, and vice versa. And like this whole idea, just because you are different means you are scary and all that stuff. And that's been going on since the beginning of mankind, right? Like just because you lived on this side of the river, you're different than, like whatever. And
Yeah.
so our job as people who are on a journey to find ourselves is to also be uh, to work with everyone around us, all things, all creatures, with openness and compassion.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean that you walk into a nest of vipers and lay down, but you know what? Like sometimes you have to expose yourself to that a little bit before you say, like, "Oh, that's the worst," and then throw a bunch of gasoline on it and light it on fire. Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah,
You
absolutely.
kind of have to put yourself out there and expose yourself a little bit to kind of maybe understand some things about what's going on.
Yeah.
And
I I I found a lot of healing from a lot of my fears, and which to me was panic and anxiety, just living in my body, by putting myself in kind of a situation or situations where I had to go through it and just keep going, and you find yourself halfway through it where you turn around and you think, all right, it's much safer that way. I can just abort this process and get back to where it's comfortable, even though the comfort is fear and panic, or just kind of keep going forward and seeing what's at the end. Um,
yeah, I mean, I think our imagination is a great creator of a billion scenarios that end up in some sort of trauma, right? And then by the
yeah,
time we go through it, you're like, what was I worried about? Like, why was I so afraid of this? And I think about my own life, like things that I was like, oh gosh, I'm not gonna, if I make this change in my life, I'm not gonna have whatever enough money in my bank account, or like I'm gonna lose this and lose that. And at the end of the day, um, that was all just wasted thoughts. I'd like to believe, and I've been proven right more than once that the universe provides.
mm-hmm,
Like where there was things where I like, oh, I don't, this is not going to work out. The universe kind of steps in a weird way and goes, oh, here you go, bud.
be fine.
Yeah, here you go. And um, but that only happened because I found the courage somehow inside of myself to like stick with it, to make that conscious change. Right? To go, okay, and again, I'm not trying to sound like I'm some superhero, but it was like a concerted effort after a long periods of worries and anxiety. Like, I can't deal with this anymore. I can't. I gotta make a change
Yeah,
regardless, and let's just see what happens. And then um, that trust in the universe boils down to trust in myself, which again, cutting through all the nonsense, all the BS, uh, and being loving and compassionate with myself and getting back to who I am
yeah,
inside of me and being okay with that.
yeah.
So,
It requires vulnerability, which is a hard concept for a lot of people.
yeah, I was talking to somebody about that recently too. It's like, when you're in a relationship, whatever it is, whether it's romantic or platonic or whatever the type it is, there is um, being vulnerable is a really an integral part of a healthy relationship. And if you
Mm,
can't be vulnerable with the people that you care about and that supposedly care about you, then there maybe is a disconnect,
yeah,
and like if you can't say those things that inside of you that are kind of like you're kind of unsure about, or you can't be that place for them to share those types of feelings, then really what's the relationship about?
yeah.
It takes a lot of guts to be vulnerable.
Yep.
Yeah, and I think we've probably all experienced, and I know I have, and I not to speak for you, but where you have kind of like said your truth to somebody that you thought cared about you, and they're like, "Whoa,
Put that back.
put that
Um,
away."
Put it away. Tuck it back in.
So, I mean, I know I've had that experience.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
that's okay. And then the growth and learning like who you are and being vulnerable, you find the people who want to be vulnerable with you and can connect with you in that.
Right, and the way I thought about it when those things happened is um, not everyone's ready for the truth.
Yeah.
Not everyone is in the same place where you are to articulate or receive
Mhm.
your truth, and so there's nothing against them, but again, the universe provides. So if you say it out there and they come back like, "Whoa, I'm not. Well, I can't get behind that jam." It's like, okay, well, maybe this wasn't what I thought it was.
Yeah.
Thanks for that.
You're welcome.
You're not going to get word up on me too.
No, I was piecing out.
I know what that means.
Okay.
Thanks. I'm
No, I
hoping
think it
for
means something. I don't know. It may mean something else now. I'm sorry.
thanks.
You're welcome.
So that's my story for this episode. I
Okay.
hope to not have to go through some sort of experience again to have another conversation piece.
I
But I
agree.
will say, you know, um, if I think that everything happens for a reason and the universe provides, like all of that experience I had with dogs in the past prepared me for that interaction with that dude
Yeah.
on Sunday.
You didn't happen to ask him if he knows who stole the hiking poles, did you?
No, but there's gonna probably another sign under there. There maybe, I don't know, maybe a neon for the man whose dog bit me.
Was it you though?
But it was funny though that the doctor that looked at me said, he said, "What happened?" And I said, "Well, I was trying to save this dog, and it turned on me." And he's like, "Oh, karma." And I was like, "Don't even say karma's a bitch, man. Don't even say it. Because if you do, here's an episode that you need to listen
But
to."
you did you put that in your doctor review?
Yeah.
I Hey, my coffee mug has dogs on it.
Oh wow.
Full circle moment right
Wow.
here.
Bringing it all back together, Jen.
For everyone who's listening, I mentioned earlier that this is the space where Andrew and I used to meet in the very beginning of COVID. I'd practice yoga over there, and this has been my meditation space. But we would sit here and study the
Well,
sutras.
you would sit there and I would sit. I wasn't sitting in front of this, but you
No,
would sit there. Yeah, we would
yeah,
study sutras, right?
it's yeah, yep, yep. So I mean, it was in this space and in this kind of connection because it was all virtual, and um, this might be the first time I think we've reconnected where I'm in this space, and it feels kind of cool to be back.
Yeah, those were some good times. We had in-depth conversations about Patanjali Yoga Sutra,
Mm-hmm.
and I remember I was telling somebody recently about that we went through each sutra line by line, and you remember that we talked about it, and then we kind of tried to dissect it, or we dissected it together, and then tried to find real world applications for
Yeah,
it. And I remember it took us quite a number of weeks, if not months, to get through it.
it was several months. It was
Yeah.
because I would write notes, and I had kind of my book marked where we left off. Um, I had no idea that when we started going through that fast forward 4 years later we would be here talking about
Yeah.
a lot of the things and that we learned, or that we talked about, that I learned for the first time.
That was the beginning of all this no expectation stuff.
Yeah.
So yeah, somebody was surprised that we were studying Yoga Sutras, and that I was teaching you that, and like they were like, "Really, you went that deep?" And I was like, "Yeah." She's like, "No one does that. No one. Everything is very cursory. It's just top high level stuff, and they just kind of take stuff out of context." And so I thought that was a really it was it was it was a neat opportunity for me to connect with the material again, and like have that one-on-one where kind of get your perspective that on it as well, and so kind of
Hmm.
like, so again, finding new ways for me to explain that
Yeah.
you know
And when thinking about COVID and the things that came out of that quarantine period, what a gift it was, because what other time on this planet would we have a forced opportunity to meet a couple times a week to not only practice asanas but study them?
yeah, no, and I mean it's funny because like 4 years ago, it was probably 4 years ago now, was it not, like
Yeah,
in this time frame
yeah.
that we were starting the studies. Yeah, because Jen maybe 4 years ago and some change was in freak out mode, so it's great for you to say like, oh, that was a great gift, because Jen
Me,
was in.
freak out
Yeah,
mode.
it was like you were
No.
like peeling the wallpaper off the walls, peeing on the curtains, like this is the worst.
Wow, that
Yeah,
is a very valid summary of the early days of COVID for me.
yeah, I do remember those, and I was like, what are we so upset about? You're like, what do you mean? What are we so upset about? Are you stupid? I was like, okay.
It's easy for you to say, who was not at home with 3 kids.
Oh, yeah.
One of them 4 years old.
No, yeah. Yeah, you're right about that. So, okay, let's wrap this one up. Keep working on finding your true nature, and you might be amazed at what you find there.
Yeah.
All right, no more dog bites.
No more.
No expectations.
Thanks for listening to No Expectations, the podcast. We invite you to come join us and carry on the conversation at noexpectations.me, our new website, where we will be posting blog posts. We will link all of our episodes there, and you can follow us on our social media sites through the website.